a chaplain, a musician, and a mother. And her spiritual journey from Mormonism in Idaho to the theaters of New York, to the small synagogue in Sullivan County is a story that is entertaining and inspiring. Told from an interfaith perspective, Melissa brings a story of infectious possibility, enthusiasm, and hopefully levity as well. Welcome.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever had such a beautiful welcome. Thank you so much. Oh gosh, I want to just preface this conversation by saying that I talk about my own spiritual journey in this speech, but I hold absolutely no judgment. And I think that a person's spirituality and a relationship with the divine is a personal relationship, an intimate relationship. And intimate relationships cannot be defined by other people. So I just want to let you know that I come into this space with my own story without judgment and without any malice. I'm just telling my story. Hope you'll find it entertaining. I am a chaplain. I am the Jewish chaplain at Rockland Psychiatric Center in Orangeburg, New York. And I also serve as the Jewish chaplain in Muncie, Pennsylvania at the Women's State Correctional Facility there. And both of those capacities, I feel honored to serve people of many faiths. And I actually was the imam for a while at Rockland Psych when they didn't have an imam. And I was actually also a chaplain for a gentleman who was of a non-Abrahamic faith. So that was really interesting and really informative. And I learned a lot about paganism and Wicca, and it really opened my eyes to whole new avenues of spirituality. So that being said, I'm going to tell you a crazy story. But if it had not happened to me, I probably would not believe it is true. But it is true. It did happen to me. So I grew up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, which if you can envision Idaho, it kind of looks like a boot, right? Idaho Falls is in the toe of the boot. It's probably an hour and a half from Yellowstone National Park. Hour and a half's drive. In fact, my sister, Ellen, my oldest sister, lived in the park for 25 years. She was married to park ranger, so that's home. If you see boxes of potatoes at the grocery store that say GPOD on the side, that's GPOD, that's a potato processing plant. A lot of my friends' parents worked for GPOD. And in fact, I would get 10 days off every October for what they called spud harvest, which meant that the kids who worked on the farms could go and harvest the potatoes, help with the harvest and not have to miss school. So my father was a physician, so we just sort of use it as vacation time. But I think I'm probably the only person in this room who's gotten time off school for potatoes. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. So we had a tradition in the neighborhood where I grew up. Idaho Falls is a town. It's now about 75,000 people. It was about 50,000 when I was growing up there. But outside of it is literally nothing. Mountains, potato fields, that's it. So I grew up in town, and in the neighborhood where I grew up, it's probably, I would say, 6 city blocks that we had this tradition that every December, as a holiday present, each family would deliver to each other family a tray of treats. Now, usually this was a baked good. Every once in a while you get a pavlova or a pudding or something like that, but usually it's something baked. But everybody had their own thing that they were known for, okay? So Mrs. Muir, she should be well, she used to make amazing apple pies from scratch. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, an apple pie from scratch is such a rare thing. It was so delicious. And then this other woman, Mrs. Martin, I remember she made these. They were cake, but they looked like snowballs. They were covered in coconut. Anyway, the point is, you were waiting for these people to bring these treats every year. You would want to see their face. You would want to take the treats from them. You were like waiting, okay? So my mother made fruitcake, which I did not think was representative of my family and how good they could bake or how well they could make a dessert. So when I was 15, I decided I'm a woman now. It's time for me to make my own thing. But I didn't want to just make chocolate chip cookies or brownie cake, like anybody can do that, right? I wanted it to be something that stood out, that was unique, and everyone would know it was mine. So I went through my mother's cookbooks. I didn't find anything exciting. And I asked a few friends' mothers who were very good bakers. And I got some ideas, but nothing like stood out to me until one day I was at the doctor's office and I was looking at a magazine, and there was in the back of the magazine a recipe and a story about the recipe. The recipe looked like a little bit hard, but I thought I could probably do this. So I bought some ingredients, made some flops, as one does. Then when I got it and then mastered it, made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things and dirtied every dish in my mother's kitchen. She wanted to kill me. But at the end of it, I wrapped it all up all nice and took them around to everybody in the neighborhood. And it was a hit. And it was such a hit that for the next few years, until I left my mother's house, I was taking these trays around. And even after I left my mother's house, every December, people were coming to my mother and asking for a plate of my famous Hamantaschen. Yes, so if you know anything about Hamantaschen, they are a traditional cookie that is eaten for Purim, which is like spring. It's a spring holiday. It usually takes place in late February, early March. And it's a Jewish traditional cookie. And so years later, my mother laughed at me and she said, only you would make Hamantaschen for Christmas cookies. So I was always a seeker, always. From jump. I was always interested in knowledge, whatever it was, and not just religious knowledge, but specifically religious knowledge. Okay. I remember I used to listen to Billy Graham on the TV. I was really a seeker. Anything spiritual, anything religious, I was quite interested in. And I was raised as a Mormon, but I'll tell you, I wasn't the best Mormon. I was not the best churchgoer. Now, there were aspects of it that I really enjoyed. For example, our youth group was amazing. I really enjoyed that. Mormons are known for doing tons of community service, which I also really enjoyed. We actually had a farm, a potato farm that supplied basically potatoes for the cannery for the bishop's storehouse, it provides food for the needy. And I really enjoyed working on the farm. And that stuff I love. But when it came to actual church and actual doctrine, I felt like out of place. It's hard to describe it. I didn't feel like I fit in. I want to interject here very briefly. I meant to say this in the beginning. I do not have a lot of experience with Unitarian Universalist congregations, except I recently started working per diem at Blaisdell, which is the substance abuse treatment facility in Orangeburg, where I also serve, but it's per diem, so not there very much. But their chaplain, their full-time chaplain is Unitarian Universalist. So she gave me a little background on the organization, and I was amazed. But my main experience with it was when I was in college, and I had friends who were not only Mormons, but also LGBT. And they did not really have a place to go. But the Unitarian Universal Fellowship in Princeton welcomed them in and gave them a spiritual outlet. So I always had that respect and that reverence for Unitarian Universalist congregations. So I was not the churchiest of kids, but I went to church. I mean, I went to church, but I wasn't like into it. So my 9th grade year, they started what they call release time. And my understanding is they have it also in New York. I did not know this, and this is a new to me. But basically what release time is that if you go to public school, your parents sign a permission slip that you can leave school for an hour every day and get religious education off campus. And in Idaho Falls, at the school where I attended, this was an extremely popular program. Across the street from my high school were at least 5 buildings. There was a Methodist building, a Catholic building, a Mormon building, and 2 others. I don't even remember but the point is everybody did this. Everybody was taking release time. So it wasn't a strange thing. So I signed up for release time, and every day at 1 o'clock after lunch, my 9th grade year, I went across the street to the Mormon building and I had religious education. And that year they were studying Old Testament. And I loved it. Now, when I say they were studying Old Testament, it was on a very, very basic level, on a very high school surface level. They were just telling the stories of the Old Testament. And I really connected to them. I remember learning about Joseph, right? Hollywood cannot even make up this story. Here's a man who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, wrongfully accused, thrown into prison. And then because he held on to his faith, he was made second in command, eventually made second in command to the richest nation on earth at the time. That's an amazing story. I thought, wow, these are really exciting stories. So anyway, I got an A++ in religious education. My parents were happy. I was happy. I signed up for religious education the next year. And the next year they were not learning Old Testament. They were learning a more specifically Mormon doctrine. And I did not last very long. I was there about 2 weeks. And at the end of the 2 weeks was the ad drop period. And I went to my father with the form and I said, can I switch out of this and go do band? And my father said, yeah, that's fine, sure. But I think you and I have to have a conversation. So I'm 16 years old, I'm in 10th grade. And I sit down with my father and he says, I see that you are a spiritual person who is thirsty for a relationship with her creator. But I think that this religion that I raised you in, this Mormon religion, is not it for you. And I want you to go and find the one that is right. Go to church with your friends, go do some reading, go explore, go figure it out. Now, I thought this was very strange because if, in the Mormon religion and most religions, this is the truth and we have the best. So for my father to be so flexible about spirituality was very eye-opening for me. So I said, okay, I'll listen to what he said. I went to church with my Catholic friend quite a bit. I remember Stations of the Cross. I really loved that. I remember I had a Hindu friend who his family was from India. So I learned a lot about Hinduism from their family. And every religion that I learned about, I enjoyed and I liked. And I thought there was always something beautiful and meaningful about each of them, but I couldn't ever really commit to any of them. I never felt very comfortable in any of them. So I sort of made a conglomerate spirituality for myself out of these experiences, out of what I had learned from books and going to church with my friends and so on and so forth. I just sort of conglomerate spirituality and I took it with me into my adult life. And I moved from Idaho Falls. I graduated high school. I moved from Idaho Falls, Idaho to Princeton, New Jersey. And I went to specialized music school called Westminster Choir College. And I studied to be an opera singer. It was a very intense course of study and it took up most of my time, but I did have a job. I had a part-time job to help pay for stuff. And I worked, it was the best job. I loved it. It was at a baby clothing store. So I really enjoy babies and I love baby stuff. I didn't have any babies in my life. My nieces and nephews were older, so my check was safe, but I got to enjoy baby stuff. And I had great bosses and reasonable pay and flexible hours. So when graduation came, and it's time for me to be a professional singer, I had some logistical things to take care of. Like I had to get an agent. I had to get, every professional singer has legal representation. I had to get all this stuff. Now, anyone who knows me, Tom, will know that I'm not good and I do not like these things. It's not my favorite thing in the world. So I said, look, I was singing a few professional jobs, nothing, I wasn't really supporting myself with it, but I was singing a little bit. I said, I'm going to keep working at the baby store for a year. I'm going to ease into the professional stuff and ease out of the baby store. And that gives me some time to get an agent and do all that stuff I don't want to do. But we have a saying in Judaism, man plans and God laughs. And God laughed because right after I made this decision that I was going to keep working at the baby store for a year, the people who owned the baby store decided they wanted to do custom embroidery. They got a custom embroidery machine and all the employees were laid off. Yeah, and I did not know what I was going to do. Because I was singing a few gigs professionally, but it wasn't anything that I could really support myself. So now I had 2 weeks to do all the stuff that I had planned to take a year to do, and I was panicking. So I said, okay, calm down. Let's go talk to some people. I know plenty of people in the business, people who graduated before me who were already living professional singer lives. And I said, let me go visit some of them. So I went to visit my friends who live in Flatbush, Brooklyn, who are professional singers. Now, they didn't have anything. They didn't have any advice for me that I didn't already know. I already knew what I had to do, right? They just said, you just have to do it. So dejected, I got onto the subway. And it was Thursday afternoon and it was before rush hour. So it was busy on the subway, but it wasn't like super busy. It was just medium busy. Remember, I flopped down in a seat and all the seats in the subway were taken except for 2. There was a seat open next to me and a seat open across from me. And I'm riding the train and we get to this lower Manhattan stop, and onto the train came a man with curls like this and a beard and a black hat and a gigantic suitcase. And he took the open seat across from me. And a woman who I assume was his wife had on a green suit and a short brown wig with a fluffy green headband that matched the suit, very stylish for 2004. And she had a little baby and she came and took the open seat next to me. And the doors of the train closed and we started to go. And I was really wrapped up in my thoughts, you guys, about my job and what am I gonna do? And oh no. And I started crying on this train, which is sort of embarrassing to talk about now, but it is what it is. I started crying. Now, I wasn't wailing. It wasn't like that. It was like tears rolling down my face. Tears of self-pity. You know, that kind of crying. And this woman in the green suit with the baby, she turned to me and she said, why are you crying? And I was so embarrassed. And I said, you know, I'm feeling sorry for myself because I lost my job and I don't know what I'm going to do. And she said right away, a beautiful blessing. She said to me, this is good. This is an opportunity for good. You're going to see, you're going to get a better job that you like even better, that pays more. This is good. And I was blown away by this. Not just because she had words of kindness for me on the subway, right? Like, which is in and of itself sort of a strange thing. But she had a real force behind these words that she knew it was going to be okay. And I was mystified. I was like, wow, thank you, lady. She said, sure, no problem. She told me she's going to her nephew's bar mitzvah in Spring Valley. She didn't tell me anything else, no other information from her. And actually, I never saw her again. I would love to see her. So we got to Penn Station and she went to her train and I went to my train. And I was never the same again. I was never the same again. Something about this woman and those words of encouragement reached out and grabbed my soul. And I knew that I could not go on living the way I had been living, because I was living a life where I didn't know things were going to be okay from one minute to the next, right? Everything was like constant anxiety and what's going to be. And here's a woman who not only knows it's going to be all right, but makes me know it too. And I said to myself, how does she know? I'm sitting on my next train, I'm sitting on the Jersey Transit train saying, how does she know? So I don't know anything about this woman, right? Except she's going to bar mitzvah in Spring Valley. And her husband has curls like this and a beard and a black hat. And that means he's an Orthodox Jew. I would see Orthodox Jews on my way from school to Lincoln Center where we do performances. We'd go through the Diamond District and I would see Orthodox Jews. And I would say to my friends, are those Amish guys? Right? And they'd say, no, those are Orthodox Jews. I'm like, oh, Orthodox Jews. So maybe that's how she knows it's going to be okay. So I started doing research on Orthodox Jews. I started learning, who are they? What's their story? Where do they come from? Why are they here? And I remember I got a certain book from the library called Holy Days. If you ever want to read an amazing book, a woman who's Jewish, sort of like, I don't want to say infiltrates, but she goes into a Hasidic household for a year. She goes through all the holidays and actually is there when they marry off their oldest daughter. So she's there for the wedding too. And it's her insight into, it's reporting really, but it's also her insights. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting to me. I really like it. So the more I learn about Judaism, the more I like it. And the more I learn, the more I realize that everything I wanted from a religion that made me feel comfortable with my spirituality was in Judaism. But I wasn't born Jewish. So I found the right religion, right? I really like it, but I'm not Jewish, so what can I do? So what do we say? Man plans and God laughs. I had a kidney infection that went very bad very quickly, and I became septic. And I was in the hospital for a few weeks. And they moved me around. I was in ICU for a while. I was in intermediate care, and then I was in a step-down unit where I had a roommate. Now, none of you all here should ever know from the hospital, which I'll be healthy and happy, you know. It's all 120. But if you're ever in the hospital, you definitely don't want to have a roommate. For sure not. If you have a roommate, you definitely don't want to have somebody that loves to talk. Right? This is the hospital. We're trying to get better here. And you definitely don't want somebody who loves television all day. And my roommate, God bless her, loved both of those things. So I remember one day she had on the news turned up real loud, and I was trying to like just take a nap and get better. And she had the news on, it was up full blast. And I hear the news announcer say, tonight begins the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. And I was like, oh, a Jewish holiday. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in Judaism. So I pushed myself up on my bed. I started paying attention to the news announcer. And my roommate saw this. And she said, oh, yeah, I had Jewish neighbors. And Sukkot, they build a hut in their backyard. And they decorate it and they have parties out there. And it seems really fun. And I was like, wow, this seems amazing. Tell me more about your neighbors. Because I was a little bit obsessed with Judaism, but I didn't want to tell anybody. But I was like, tell me more. So she starts telling me about her neighbors, and eventually the conversation turns, as it does, to famous people that are Jewish. So she names some names of people that are Jewish. I named some names of famous people I knew that were Jewish. And she mentioned that Sammy Davis Jr. was Jewish. Anybody here not know Sammy Davis Jr.? Right. So this is going to show my ignorance right here, because I did not know that people of color could be Jewish. My experience with Jews was white people with curls and beards and hats, and that was it. So when she said Sammy Davis Jr. was Jewish, I was like, how could he be Jewish? He was a black guy. She said, oh no, he converted. And I said, you could convert to Judaism? She said, yeah, people do it all the time. And I remember laying back on my pillow and thinking, I have to get out of this bed and out of this hospital and go convert to Judaism. Sidebar, if any of you do not know Sammy Davis Jr.'s conversion story, it's pretty miraculous. I think it was Lenny Bruce gave him a mezuzah, just a little tiny, like almost Torah scroll. It has certain verses from the Torah written on it that we put on the doorposts. If you ever see, like, it's on an angle, sometimes you see that. Lenny Bruce gave Sammy Davis Jr. one of these early in his career. And Sammy Davis Jr. was in a terrible accident that same night that destroyed his eye. So you know this story. It's an amazing story. And he said that he believed that the only reason he was saved from this accident is because he had that mezuzah. And that's what caused him to convert. So we all have our stories. Anyway, I said, I got to convert to Judaism. Thank God, I got better. I got out of the hospital. I went home to my apartment where I was living in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I found out that I lived half a mile away from the big Orthodox synagogue there in Elizabeth. And I was like, hello, I'm right here in an Orthodox community. I'm going to go be Jewish. I'm going to go convert and be Jewish. So I'm going to call the rabbi. So I called the secretary and she said, Rabbi Elazar Teitz, who was a very major rabbi, I had no idea. We'll see you Tuesday morning, but he only has 5 minutes. So be here at 9 o'clock, don't be late. I said, sure. So I dressed, got myself dressed, made myself nice. I went to see the rabbi. He was so incredibly kind to me. He welcomed me into his office. He gave me a drink of water and he said, how can I help you? And I said, I want to convert to Judaism. And he said, why? He didn't skip a beat. Well, I don't know how to tell him why, right? How do you express something like that into words? So I just told him the story of the lady on the train, just like I just told you. And he's there and he's stroking his beard and he said, that is a very interesting story. I never heard anything like that before, but I believe you. And I think that you're serious, but I can help you right now because I'm retiring. And I say retiring because he should be well, he's still going strong. But he's also in his 90s, 84 and 85, something like that. But I tell you what, I'm gonna send you home with some books and some other numbers of rabbis you can call. And I said, okay, no problem. So I started calling rabbis. Now, Elizabeth is 2 bridges away from Brooklyn. So there are a whole lot of Orthodox rabbis in this section of the world. So I was visiting 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 different rabbis every week for an entire year. And I was hearing, no, I don't do conversion, so call this other rabbi. And that rabbi would say, no, I can't really help you. I have too many candidates right now, but call this other rabbi. One rabbi told me you could really only do a conversion in Israel. And I was trying to move to Israel for a while, which is totally insane. And I heard about another rabbi and he said, yeah, I can absolutely convert you, but it's going to take you 5 years and you have to move into the basement of my house. And after 52 weeks, 1 year of hearing no, 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 I was frustrated. I was extremely frustrated. So like any normal frustrated person at the end of their rope, I took out an ad in a newspaper because that's normal. There was this little newspaper that came out every Thursday with engagement announcements, wedding announcements, and like free ads. So like carriages for sale, lost and found, stuff like that. So I took out a free ad in this newspaper in Elizabeth and I said, I want to convert to Orthodox Judaism. Please help. And I put my email address. I think it was like, please help me 77@gmail.com. I didn't say who I was, what. I just said I want help. Okay, I just put it in the newspaper. I said goodbye, whatever's gonna happen. I forgot about it, honestly. That was Thursday that the paper came out. Sunday morning, I received an email from a young man who said, I'm in yeshiva in Queens and I saw your ad and I want to let you know that if you are not going away for Shabbat to other families, that this is really a place to start. Because not only will you get to see other kinds of neighborhoods and other kinds of communities, because even in Orthodoxy, there's big spectrum. But the families will know you and they'll be able to refer you to a rabbi, and then it will go much smoother. And I was like, this is such useful advice. This is the first good advice I've received in an entire year. So I wrote back and I said, oh, thank you so much. This is such good advice. Could you please help me find a place to go for Shabbos? Love, Melissa. And this young man wrote back to me. He said, I'm very sorry, but when we're in yeshiva, we don't talk to girls. So I'm going to have to discontinue our correspondence. And I said, wait a minute. Please do not do this. You are really giving me the first good advice I've had in 52 long weeks. Please help me. I just need you to set me up with a place for Shabbos. Can't you talk to your principal or whatever? And he said, okay, I'll talk to my Rosh Yeshiva. So the Rosh Yeshiva said, yes. Set her up with a place for Shabbos, and then don't talk to her anymore after that. And I said, great, no problem. So guess where he set me up to go for Shabbos? My first Shabbos, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So I go to Williamsburg on Friday afternoon, and my eyes are like this because every single guy is the guy on the train. And I had no idea there were so many Orthodox Jews in the world, let alone this little corner of Brooklyn. Like I knew Williamsburg as like hipsters and artists and like that kind of, like here's this whole section of Orthodox Jews. So I go to the house where I'm supposed to have Shabbat, and it's Wolf and Esty Landau. They own Central Market in Williamsburg, which is a health food supermarket. Wonderful people. And I had such an amazing Shabbat there. I had such an amazing Shabbat. I was not even Jewish. And these people welcomed me into their home and treated me like a member of their own family. Not even a member of their own family. They really treated me like a queen, if you want to know the truth. I got served first. And I just had a very warm, wonderful feeling. And I felt comfortable. I thought, this is it. I've arrived. This is the spirituality that I'm comfortable with. So Mrs. Landau and I became good friends. And she sent me to her friends for Shabbat. And her friends would send me to their friends for Shabbat. So I was going all over to these different communities. So Lakewood, New Jersey, I went to Montreal, Canada. I went to New Square in Rockland County, went to a few different places. But every Matzah Shabbos, after Shabbos, Mrs. Landau would always call me if I wasn't at her house and ask me how my Shabbos was. So I remember one Shabbos, she called me and she said, how was your Shabbos? I said, it was great. How was yours? She said, it was great. She said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, it's my last contract singing job. My last contract singing job, meaning I can't get out of it, in a church in Binghamton, New York. She said, oh, you're going upstate? Okay, I want you to go to Monroe and stop. And she said, down at the scene of the Satmar. I don't know what those words meant. What she meant was to go and pray at the grave of the Satmar Rebbe, who was the founder of Kiryas Joel in Monroe, New York. A little Jewish enclave there, not so little anymore. But I did not know what that meant. So I said, okay, fine, I'm gonna go. Very thick fog that day. I couldn't see in front of me 3 feet. Finally, I see a lady on the side of the road. I said, can you please help me get to the cemetery? She said, sure. You're 2 turns away. Finally, I get there. And there's a gigantic hand-painted sign. It's not there anymore. And it says, do not enter this place unless your stockings are at least 70 denier thick, with 3 hand-painted exclamation points in Yiddish and English. I said, my socks are not good enough, and I'm not even Jewish, and I cannot go in there. So I called Mrs. Landau on my cell phone from the parking lot. I said, Mrs. Landau, there's a terrifying sign that says that my socks aren't good enough. And she said, well, you have socks on, right? It was December. I said, sure. She said, okay, you're good enough. Just, it's this crazy weather. No one's going to be there. Just go in, put some charity into the charity box, light a candle, and say a chapter of Psalms. That's it. You sure? She said, yes. So I remember I went past the sign, through the fog into the cemetery, and finally I got to the Rebbe's grave is inside a little building called an Ohel. So I open the door and I see the grave. Little papers, people write their Hebrew name on the paper and tuck it into the grave as a prayer. Candles were lit and not a person was there. A pin could have been dropped and you would have heard it. It was silent. So I did what she said. I put money in the charity box. Okay, great. I lit a candle and I picked up the Psalms, but it's in Hebrew and I can't read. I'm not Jewish and my socks aren't good enough. So I felt ridiculous and I started to cry. And I just said in my own words, God, someone important is buried there. That's clear. There are rules about socks. That's how important he is. I need you to help me to know what to do. And it's very hard for me to explain what happens to me in that because it's spiritual, right? Spiritual things can't really be expressed with words sometimes. But I went into the grave. I wanted to be Jewish. I had good intentions. But after the spiritual experience I had by the grave that day, I knew I didn't have a choice anymore. I had to do it. I had to become Jewish. So a few weeks after this, I got a call from Mrs. Landau, her weekly call, and she said, hi, how was Shabbos? I said, it was good. I was home for Shabbos and it was early. Sunset came early because it was in the winter. And she said, what are you doing right now? And I said, I'm not doing anything. I plan on just having a quiet Saturday night at home or reading a book. And she said, okay, there's a rabbi's wife who's here in Williamsburg and she needs to get to where her husband is in Great Neck. And we're having a really hard time finding a car for her. Do you think you could take her and her daughter? And I said, sure, I'm not doing anything. So I got dressed, pick up this rabbi's wife and his daughter. And I was nervous because I thought maybe they're not going to have good English. They had excellent English and she was hilarious. I've stolen a few one-liners from her before. She's okay with it. I drove him to Great Neck and she said, please come in and meet my husband. I said, sure. So we go in, I would sit down with the Rebbe's assistant and he's going to write my name on a piece of paper. So the rabbi's wife said, what's your Hebrew name? And I said, oh, I'm not Jewish. And she was like, what? I said, but I won't be. I really do. She said, you have got to speak to my husband. So she burst into where the Rebbe was and she is talking to him like this. He's talking to her like this. That's a conversation that I witnessed from about 50 feet away. When she came back to me, she said, look, let's have a meal. We'll wash, we'll have a meal together. And then we'll go in to see the rabbi. I said, okay. So I get in to see him and he's very like on fire. He said, I understand you want to convert to Judaism. I said, yes, I do. And he said, don't you know you're going to be hated? Jews are hated. It doesn't matter. They are hated worldwide. In every community, there's at least one anti-Semite. Are you ready for that? And I said, look, people are hated all over for being different, you know? I'm a fat person. It's already on the list. It doesn't scare me. So then he said, I haven't seen or heard anything from you that shows me that you're serious about conversion. And I felt rejection again. And I said, okay, this is not my first rodeo with rejection. And you're telling me no, and that's fine. But I'm going to leave. And whatever rabbi on the list I haven't called yet, Orthodox rabbi, I'm going to call him. If he tells me no, I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to keep doing that until somebody says yes. I don't care if it takes me the rest of my life. Bye. And I started to walk out. And his assistant came and got me. He said, wait, come back. And the rabbi wrote on a piece of paper a phone number, and he gave it to me. And he said, this is the number of Rabbi Peretz Steinberg. He's in Queens, and he's going to help you with your conversion. And I didn't really think anything about it. I was like, yeah, right. But I thought it's worth a try. I'm going to give him a call. So I called Rabbi Steinberg, and he said, oh, I was expecting your call. This is the next morning. He said, I've been waiting for your call. You have? He said, yes, the Biala Rebbe told me you're very serious. You come very highly recommended. So please come in and meet with me and with the other rabbis. It's called a rabbinical court. They call it a bezdin. We would love to meet you and we'll help you with your conversion. So I met with them and I had a conversation with them about my family history and why I was interested in Judaism. And I'll spare you the great details of what I had to learn and all of that. But right after Hanukkah, 18 years ago, was my conversion. And I ran around that day doing all of the things, all of the good deeds that I could, because they finally counted for me, you know, as a Jew. I was like giving everyone charity and like separating meat and milk in the grocery store in 2 different carts and like being really, really strict about stuff. And then one day I was at work and Rabbi Steinberg, who converted me, called me on the phone and he said, what about a shidduch, which means a marriage proposal? And I was like, I mean, I was 28 years old, but I was a brand new baby Jew. I was like brand new, a newborn, really. I said, I'm a brand new Jew. Can I get used to my new life first? And he said, no. And I didn't know it, but the night that I met the Bial Rebbe and he gave me Rabbi Steinberg's number, the Rebbe had somebody in mind for me. And this boy had worked for him when he was learning in Israel. He had been like an assistant to him. So we called him up and he said, what are you doing for, you know, marriage? And he said, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm working on getting my rabbinical ordination. He said, I have someone perfect for you. So just hang tight. So we have what our first date was called a basho. Now a basho is where you go to a complete stranger's house and they give you cake and they give you coffee and there's beautiful flowers. And then you meet another complete stranger who may or may not be your life partner. It was a very curious thing. And I felt very awkward, but I had done my best, like to make myself nice. And here comes this potential life mate. And he's tall and he's handsome and he has all the stuff. He looks good. He's speaking English, which was a big bonus. And he said, I understand that you're a convert. I said, yes. He said, how did that happen? I said, strap in. I told him that story. And I told him, my first Shabbat was by the Landaus. He said, I know the Landaus. How do you know the Landaus? And I said, oh, that's another crazy story. I was very frustrated when I couldn't find a Rav to help me. I put it out in the newspaper, and then the yeshiva boy answered me. He said, wait a minute. He said, was this in the spring 2 years ago? And I said, yes. And he said, was the newspaper the Jewish Week in Elizabeth? And I said, yes. And he said, is your email address pleasehelpme77@gmail.com? And I said, yes. And he said, I'm the one that answered your ad. And we have been married for 17 years and we have 7 amazing children.
Awesome.
Thank you. So who cares? Why am I here telling you this story? I don't even know what people are supposed to take away from this whole spiritual journey that I have. And again, I want it to be interfaith. I'm not disparaging Mormonism. It's certainly great for people. I mean, I work with people in the prison. It's great for them. It just didn't work for me. But I know that this lady on the train, she didn't have to talk to me. I was totally the opposite of the kind of person that lives in her community. I had tattoos, had purple hair, I had combat boots on, and I was crying. But she saw me in a vulnerable moment, and all she said was, "Why are you crying?" That's it, 4 words. Because she said those 4 words, my life changed forever. For the good. For the positive. Now, I'm not going to say I never get depressed, not my life is perfect. That's not true. But I am so much happier fundamentally now that I'm so confident in my spirituality. It's only because someone reached out from their bubble into another person's bubble. And I want to thank you again very much for having me come and speak for you today. I feel very honored and very blessed. And I have a couple of minutes. Could I take questions? If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Amazing story.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. Yeah,
Do you speak in different places?
I do. It's like a side job. That's how I pay for my kids' education, actually, which is not cheap. But yeah, I talk all over. So I tell this insane story because why else did God give it to me? I'm not really sure.
It's a beautiful story.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a happy one. It has a happy ending, thank God. Yes.
No, it's just remarkable that the man you happened to be, who responded to your email was.
Yeah, it was totally crazy. And we did date for a while, but I pretty much knew from that point on, like, this is gonna happen. And thank God we've been married happily for 17 years, so.
What's his name?
Joseph Kolakowski. He's a rabbi, he's the assistant rabbi in White Lake. And he's also a chaplain. He works at SCI Waymart in Waymart, Pennsylvania. And he actually is a supervisory chaplain, so he handles all of the religions. So he also has an interfaith job, which has been, it's had a good impact on us, on our relationship and on our family. Because it's so easy, right, for us to get into our little bubble. And it's good to branch out and see that there are other ways that God touches people in this world. So that's really been fun and exciting.
Sharon has a question.
Okay.
So I'm so fascinated. First of all, I happen to be somebody who everybody knows. If I want something, I just say, just put it out there in the world and somehow it comes back to you. And they say, how did that happen? I said, well, I don't know. I just put it out there. And I have a faith that I'm going to get some answer. I may not like the answer, but it's going to happen, which way it's going to be. I have that faith. So your story sounds totally plausible to me. But the thing is that I always listen to Henry Louis Gates, and I'm always so surprised to find people who didn't know they had any Jewish DNA happen to have Jewish blood. I was wondering if you ever had a DNA test just to see if somewhere back in your ancestry you've got some actual Jewish blood in you. Other than that, I wanted to ask this one: are you a cantor as well? Do you sing in shul?
So I'll tell you that I sort of put my professional singing life on hold. And Rabbi Steinberg did say to me once, you need to figure out how your music fits into your Judaism. I haven't quite figured it out, but I'm working on some stuff.
Great.
I'm working on some stuff. Every time I have a book that I'm working on, and I have written some songs to go with it, but every time I work on the book, I have a baby. So, I mean, thank God, but it's sort of like gotten pushed back. But now I'm sort of like coming to the end of that season of my life. So it's time to start working on the book again. Yeah, I have not done a DNA test yet. Not for a lack of interest, it just wasn't like the first thing on my mind, but I'm sure there's Jewish blood in my family. I have very close ties to Spain. So I'm sure there's like some gaps there where potential, Judaism could come in because all of that was so squashed down in Spain. I don't know, we'll see.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, it could be something exciting, but I really relate to and I admire your faith and the fact that you could put the thing that you need or the thing that you're seeking out into the world and trust that the universe or God will bring it back to you. That's really admirable. I have a lot of respect for that. Well, thanks.
So do our candles, actually.
What?
Our candles work too. I think our candles are pretty.
Sure. Well, it's a physical way to stay, we need physical things. God is not physical. He gives us physical stuff so that we can connect to him and say, God, this is what I need. So, yeah, it does help for sure.
Have you ever
Yes.
wanted to be a cantor?
Have I ever wanted to be a cantor? Not especially. First of all, I already went through opera school. I got my bachelor's degree. It was extremely rigorous. I mean, it was amazing. I loved it. I had very good opportunities. I'll name drop a little bit. I sang with some famous people. I went on tour with Julie Andrews for a Royal Christmas tour. And Christopher Plummer was on that tour too. I sang with Michael Tilson Thomas, and I was on a recording that won a Grammy with Zednek McCall from New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. Like, I did all that stuff. Cantoring has never appealed to me just because I'm not good at school and it takes a lot of schooling to become an official cantor. I do loose musical things, like we'll have a Kumsitz, just a gathering of, I'll get some ladies from synagogue together and we'll just sing together and, have candlelight and some snacks. We'll do that, but I've never done anything official. I've been kind of busy. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So I do have one closing song for you. This is a Leah Morris song, and it's got hand movements. So, and it starts out like this. You gotta keep your heart wide open, though the waves gonna push you around. We'll try that. You gotta keep your heart wide open, though the waves gonna push you around. This is the second verse. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. That you gotta keep your heart wide open, though the waves gonna push you around. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. We'll do that one more time. That way, anytime you're walking through the street, you don't have to do the hand motions, but this is a great accompaniment for your life, for your spirituality, for living. You gotta keep your heart wide open, though the waves gonna push you around. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. So we'll extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and make manifest in our days until we are together again. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.